New York City, a place built on ambition, money, and power. But beneath the flashing lights and crowded streets, another empire once operated in silence. An empire controlled not by politicians, but by organized crime. For decades, the Mafia shaped the underworld of America, and among all the crime families that ruled New York, none became more feared, more powerful, or more legendary than the Gambino crime family. Their influence stretched across construction unions, gambling operations, loan sharking, extortion, nightclubs, and murder. At the center of that empire stood one man, a man who dressed like a celebrity, spoke like a businessman, and ordered violence like a king. His name was John Gotti. To the media, he became known as the Teflon Don, because no matter how many charges prosecutors threw at him, nothing seemed to stick. He walked free while witnesses disappeared, jurors were influenced, and rivals vanished forever. But every empire eventually faces collapse, and by the late 1980s, the federal government had made one thing clear: bringing down John Gotti had become personal. This is the story of how America's most powerful mafia family finally began to fall. Before we go into the story, please subscribe and check our channel for the fall of notorious gangsters. John Gotti was born in the Bronx, New York, in 1940. His family struggled financially. They lived in crowded neighborhoods where survival often mattered more than rules. As a child, Gotti learned early that power earned respect, not kindness, not honesty, power. The streets around him were filled with gang activity, illegal gambling, and organized crime figures who carried influence like royalty. Young Gotti admired them. The expensive cars, the sharp suits, the fear they commanded. To him, gangsters weren't villains. They were successful men. By his teenage years, Gotti had already entered street crime. He joined local gangs involved in theft, robbery, and hijacking. School no longer interested him. The streets did. And eventually, those streets led him toward the Mafia. During the 1960s, Gotti became associated with the Gambino crime family. At the time, the family was already one of the most powerful criminal organizations in America. Led by bosses who understood secrecy and discipline, the Gambinos controlled enormous illegal businesses across New York City. But Gotti stood out from others. He was aggressive, charismatic, confident, and dangerously ambitious. Unlike older mafia leaders who avoided public attention, Gotti enjoyed it. He liked expensive clothing, public appearances, attention from the media. That confidence helped him rise quickly within the organization, but it also made him dangerous, because ambition inside the Mafia often leads to betrayal, and betrayal inside organized crime usually ends in bloodshed. By the 1970s, John Gotti had become deeply involved in hijacking operations near JFK Airport. Cargo theft was extremely profitable. Trucks carrying expensive merchandise regularly disappeared. Electronics, jewelry, clothing, millions of dollars flowed through organized crime networks. The Gambino family earned massive profits from these operations, and Gotti became known as someone willing to use intimidation and violence to protect business. But law enforcement had started paying attention. Federal investigators increasingly viewed organized crime as a national threat. Wiretaps became more advanced, and prosecutors slowly began building cases against mafia leaders. Surveillance improved. Still, convicting them remained extremely difficult. Witnesses feared retaliation. Evidence disappeared. People stayed silent. The Mafia's greatest weapon wasn't violence alone. It was fear, and fear kept entire neighborhoods quiet. Then came one of the most important turning points in Gotti's life. In 1985, Gambino boss Paul Castellano was murdered outside a steakhouse in Manhattan. The assassination shocked the Mafia world. Castellano had been the official boss of the Gambino family. Ordering his death without approval from Mafia leadership violated major Mafia rules. But investigators believed John Gotti orchestrated the hit. As Castellano arrived outside Sparks Steakhouse, gunmen emerged from the darkness. Within seconds, bullets tore through the cold New York air. The Gambino boss collapsed on the sidewalk, dead. And just like that, John Gotti seized power. The assassination changed everything. Some mobsters admired him, others feared him, but everyone understood one thing. John Gotti was now the most powerful mafia boss in America. Once Gotti became boss, his public image exploded. Newspapers followed him everywhere. Television crews waited outside courtrooms. Photographers captured his expensive suits and confident smile. Unlike previous mafia leaders who operated in secrecy, Gotti behaved almost like a celebrity. And strangely, the public became fascinated by him. Some viewed him as charming. Others saw him as terrifying. But either way, John Gotti became famous. Then came the trials. Again and again, prosecutors attempted to convict him. And again, he walked free. Witnesses changed stories. Juries failed to convict. Cases collapsed. That's when the media gave him a new nickname, the Teflon Don, because charges never seemed to stick. But behind the cameras and expensive clothing, pressure was growing. The FBI had become obsessed with destroying organized crime, and Gotti's public behavior made him impossible to ignore. Agents monitored his movements constantly. Secret surveillance teams followed him through New York. Investigators studied his associates. Federal prosecutors searched desperately for weaknesses inside the Gambino organization. Then they found one, a man named Salvatore Gravano, better known as Sammy the Bull Gravano, and his decision would change mafia history forever. Sammy Gravano had risen through organized crime as a feared enforcer. He had participated in murders, violence, extortion, racketeering. Inside the Gambino family, Gravano became one of Gotti's most trusted men. But trust inside organized crime rarely lasts forever. As federal investigations intensified, tension inside the mafia increased. Paranoia spread. Hidden microphones captured conversations prosecutors had waited years to hear. And during those recordings, Gotti made a critical mistake. Investigators claimed the tapes revealed Gotti blaming Gravano for criminal activities. To Sammy Gravano, that sounded like betrayal. Inside mafia culture, loyalty meant survival. And once trust disappeared, everything changed. Facing life in prison, Gravano made a decision almost unheard of for someone at his level. He agreed to cooperate with the government. The news sent shockwaves through organized crime. A high-ranking mafia underboss had become an informant. For decades, mafia members followed omerta, the code of silence. You never cooperated with authorities. Never. But Sammy Gravano broke that code completely, and the damage would be devastating. In 1992, prosecutors finally brought their strongest case against John Gotti. This time, they had wiretap recordings, witness testimony, insider cooperation, and Sammy Gravano himself. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere felt historic. Federal prosecutors presented the mafia boss not as a celebrity, but as the leader of a violent criminal empire. Gravano testified about murders, extortion, organized crime operations. The image of the untouchable mafia king began collapsing in public view. For years, Gotti had smiled outside courtrooms with confidence. But now, the evidence was overwhelming. After deliberation, the verdict finally arrived. Guilty. John Gotti was convicted of murder, racketeering, and multiple federal crimes. The sentence: life in prison without parole. For the FBI, it was one of the greatest victories in the history of organized crime investigations. For the Gambino family, it marked the beginning of decline. And for America, it signaled something even bigger. The golden era of the mafia was ending.